Hey guys, what's going on? I hope everybody's doing good this morning, and thanks for taking a few minutes out of your morning and checking out today's video. And today we're going to wade into a little bit of a controversial topic for some people. It shouldn't be controversial at all, since you're dealing with protecting the sport of bass fishing for future generations. But some people make it controversial, and that's the topic of keeping bass and eating bass. So I sort of wanted to give you guys my opinion about this and talk about it, and I'd really be curious to hear your guys' opinion on it too. I'm a member. There's several these private lake groups around the country. Like every lake in the country has like a private group you can join on social media, and I'm a member of several of them, like Table Rock Lake, Stockton Lake, and these are groups that post just lake stuff. I mean, it could be anywhere between just boating or swimming or fishing. And every so often, every couple weeks, some guy posts a picture on the boards there of like a bunch of bass on a board that are dead. He's getting ready to flay out 5 or 6 pounders. And of course, the board blows up then with comments. You've got most of the people on there are like criticizing the person for doing that, when they could be eating other type of fish. And then there's a few defenders on there that basically see it as their right, that type of stuff. So I want to talk a little bit about that. First of all, when it comes to conservation issues, specifically what we're talking about, keeping bass, I see a lot of the conservation departments around the country, like we have a Department of Conservation here in Missouri. Every state does. I see a lot of them out of touch a little bit with the reality of the situation. They, for the most part, with maybe the exception of Texas. Texas has some excellent fishery management programs down there. That's why it has such good fishing. But for the most part, a lot of state agencies are way too liberal with their creel limits. I mean, Louisiana still has, I think, a 15 bass limit. I think maybe there's several states that do 12 inches long. And it's really unsustainable when you're talking about the number of bass anglers that increase all the time and the quality of those anglers as far as how they're getting better at catching the fish. I got a little sage wanted in there. So it's not the way it was, back 30 or 40 years ago. I mean, bass anglers can decimate a fishery if they wanted to. If bass anglers would follow the state guidelines on creel limits for a lot of times, it would wipe our fisheries out in a matter of a couple of years. There's just not that many fish to be going around for people to be keeping, 10, 15 bass a day. So from that standpoint, I think that I don't know if a lot of those people, I'm not criticizing them for how they do their job, but I know that I'm on the water more than than probably any conservation agent is. So I see this firsthand, and I know a lot of you guys too. I know a lot of you guys have as well. So let's talk a little bit about if it's okay to keep them or not. First of all, I think there's an attitude out there amongst some anglers that get on there and defend these people keeping and catching bass, that it's their right as an American. And that is completely not the way that you want to look at this. This has nothing to do with your rights as a United States citizen to keep bass. It has everything to do with doing the right thing and showing some consideration for future generations on what they're going to inherit on this planet. That's what it has everything to do. And I think a lot of the anglers out there that are really adamant about keeping bass, and they get angry anytime that some people criticize them for keeping and eating and killing bass. I just don't, I think there's a little bit of selfishness that goes in there. I don't think that a lot of those people, I don't think a lot of those people look down the road as far as what their grandchildren are going to inherit based upon their actions now, as far as what they do, because I think a lot of people see it as an isolated incident. These dudes out there, I saw one guy out there, he posted a picture, and I'm assuming there was 3 people in the boat, but he had like 15 or 16 bass from Stockton Lake, and these were all like, 3 to 5 pounders that he had laying out on a board, and they were all dead, stiff as a board there. obviously the post just blew up because a lot of people were just disgusted by it, and I was too. But when you have that going on all the time, you're taking hundreds of millions of eggs out of the lake every time. And I saw it also, Table Rock Lake this spring, I don't know what it was, but you could go down to a launch ramp in April and there would be dead bass carcasses everywhere over the ramps that people had filleted bass out right on the ramps. I'm assuming these people caught these fish at night, filleted them out, threw the carcasses in the water, and a lot of them were not even legal sized fish. You could tell they were, Missouri has a 15-inch limit. You could tell a lot of these were, 12 and 13-inch fish. I gotta let Sage back in the house. She's freaking on. So from that standpoint, I think there's a lot of issues that are going on there as far as what we have to face on the reality of the situation. So first of all, I think a lot of it comes in with perception, and a lot of it comes in with education. Because if you start educating the public to say, hey, look, if we take out X amount of bass out of a lake, this is how many, eggs that you're taking out, or this is how long that it takes for a bass to get 4 or 5 pounds. I don't think a lot of people really realize that. A lot of people that take these bass out of the lake, they think there's just an infinite number of fish out there that you just can't have any impact on. But that's not the case. I've seen the quality of fishing deteriorate over the years. One of the things we have to do is educate the public to change the attitude a little bit, where it's like, just because they spend $15 for an annual fishing license doesn't give them the right to take out hundreds and hundreds of pounds of bass a year for that $15 license. It just doesn't equate. I mean, here in Missouri, it's $15 for an annual permit, either 12 or 15, I can't remember, and you're allowed to keep 6 bass a day. So if some guy lived on the lake and he took out 6 bass a day, I mean, you're talking about, well over 1,000 bass that he's taken out of that lake for $12 or $15 a year. That's something about that just doesn't equate to being right with me. But what we have to do on this is we have to educate the public that is resistant to this, to basically the impact that they're having by taking these sport fish out, and sort of encourage them and push them over to more prolific species like white bass, crappie, catfish, that type of stuff, different type of fish that can absorb that fishing pressure on the lake. And this is easier said than done, because one of the things that I found out on dealing with people that are really adamant about keeping and killing bass is they have their heels dug in to basically ignore all the scientific data and reality behind, creel limits, taking fish out of the lake. And their heels are dug in on the whole viewpoint as it's their right as an American citizen to do this. And that is like a misguided approach. Like I said, there's no empathy behind that. There's nothing that has to do with, considering what their actions are going to be doing to impact future generations. And I'm not really sure where that comes from. I think a lot of that is probably, how people were raised, their attitudes about that. There's some people out there that were raised to see fish as nothing but a food source. And that's the way it was back when I started out. When I started back out fishing in the 70s, people didn't release fish. It was catch and eat all the time. A lot of people caught a bunch of fish, put them in the freezer. They got freezer burn. They never even used them. And gradually people transcended, or a lot of people transcended, that need to feel like they've got to keep everything to the satisfaction of catch and release. Because, here's the thing about it. If you catch a 5-pound bass and you have the fight of your lifetime, you have like a 12-year-old kid fighting this 5-pound bass, and it jumps out of the water and it's all crazy. The experience of that is invaluable versus flaying that thing out and putting it in some hot grease. And that's what, I don't know, I guess from my perception, I have a hard time, understanding, that disconnect a little bit. So the question remains is like, can you keep bass? To eat them? It's like, my response to that would be, if somebody has to keep bass, if they just cannot throw one back, at least do it on the smaller size class fish, the skinny bass, the ones that are that are just barely the minimum length limit, and out of season where they're not spawning, something in different times of the year. Specifically, if you have a lake that has a prolific amount of spotted bass, then yeah, I could see how somebody, if they wanted to occasionally keep one, that would be okay. But a lot of these lakes that we're seeing around here right now, where these people are just keeping everything, it just makes me sick. I remember Aaron Martins he's really passionate about this too. Aaron and I have had a lot of talks about, people keeping and killing bass, and Aaron was telling me about one of the Bassmaster Elite Series he fished on Lake Falcon, and there was this dude down there that had he was this older dude. He's probably older. He's probably my age. And there was a fish cleaning station at this place at Falcon, and Aaron noticed this guy was cleaning bass every single day that he was down there. He'd like catch a limit every day and clean it out. And Aaron walked up there to him one day, and Aaron said he had like 3 7-pound bass getting ready to clean there, along with the limit. And Aaron's like, dude, he said, why are you doing this? Why are you killing these 7-pound bass? I mean, do you know how long it takes for a bass to get 7 pounds? Do you know the odds that when a bass is hatched out and is a fry, the odds of it to get this big are? I mean, why can't you release these things? And he goes, I don't care. He goes, if they're 12 inches long or if they're 20 pounds, if I catch one, it's going to get cleaned and eat. And he goes, so that was this dude's attitude. He was so disconnected from the reality of what he was doing and catch and release that it was just completely over his head. So that right there, I don't know if you're ever going to reach people like that that have done that their whole lives and got some type of a chip on their shoulder as far as for, people that criticize them for catching bass. There's a segment out there that don't. But I think that when you're talking about what can we do about it, I think the first thing that comes with it, I think the state agencies, the state conservation departments need to come out with some type of a viewpoint or a message to encourage catch and release on bass. The pressure on them is heavier than ever they've ever been. They're going to continue to get heavier. We have more people on the water now than we ever have, and we're going to continue to have more of that. So we cannot continue to have these liberal creel limits. The conservation department needs to come out with some type of policy to encourage people that want to eat fish to go after other species and release the black bass. And I've never seen a man-made impoundment ever that was overpopulated with bass. I mean, there's when you talk about a large lake, I can see it, on ponds, because I've had ponds myself, and you do have to manage those a little bit. But when you're talking about a man-made reservoir that's thousands of acres, there's a natural balance that occurs there, specifically if you have habitat. In my opinion, those state agencies should be totally focused on increasing habitat in a lake, because the more habitat that you have, the larger bass population that lake can support. That's why these lakes that have a lot of aquatic, vast grass flats and vegetation support so many more bass, simply because the habitat can support the entire food chain. So anyway, that's just a few thoughts, guys. It's sort of a frustrating thing for me, because I work so hard to encourage people to practice catch and release. So, kids like my son Elijah can have good fishing 50 years from now. So everybody can go out there and have good fishing. And then you see some guys out there that just put the knife to anything they catch. And it's sort of like, it just, washes our efforts backwards. So let me know what you guys think. I'd be curious to hear about that. I'm not coming from this viewpoint of this privileged tournament angler. That's not it at all. I would have this same attitude if I didn't fish tournaments. It would all be about a conservation issue to me, a balance, because if you guys spend much time out in the woods or water like I do, you know that everything has got to live in balance. If you don't live in balance and you don't follow the natural cycles of the natural worlds, the laws of nature, that's when you have problems and issues. And that's the direction we're headed towards these people that are just keeping and catching these prime age spawning bass. So throw me some comments out there. Let me know what you guys think. I'd be really curious to see if we can get a conversation going up here. And we'll talk to y'all later. See you.